*6 to unmute. Again, that number 669-254-5252. And the meeting ID is 161-750-5079. With that, I guess we have to do the public comment before we can do the consent items. I would say I am going to recommend for consent items. I was going to recommend more, but we'll recommend 1, 3, 4, and 5 for consent. I am going to recommend for consent items. And someone, if everybody else could turn their mics off, because I can hear myself coming back a few seconds later. And someone, all right, Mr. Bruins, are we ready for public comment?
Yes, we are. We have 2 callers.
Please go ahead.
So, okay. Caller with the last 4 digits, 4024.
Are we ready for public comment?
You are.
Yes, we are.
Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Callers.
And then, who is this?
Can you hear me?
We can. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on.
Usually they call me white nigger too, but you're the niggers because the corruption of transportation doesn't allow me to catch the bus on time. I like to speak on all items and general public comment with my time.
Okay, you have 2 items for, or 2 minutes for items on the agenda and 1 minute for general public comment. Please begin.
No, he has less time than that because he just used some of his time.
Oh, fuck you, asshole. I'm talking. Don't interrupt. Who's that asshole speaking to? Who the fuck you think you are? Buddy, get to our business, you fucking motherfucker.
Mr. Herman, if you're off topic one more time, you're out of the meeting.
Chongo.
Okay, cut him off.
Let me come.
Next speaker.
Okay. The next speaker is last 4 digits are 3300. Please unmute yourself. Yes. Please identify yourself and which items you'd like to speak on. The next speaker is last.
Yes, hello. The name is Tyler Roberts. I just wanted to talk about there's a motion from Koretz and Blumenfield according to section 80.81 about the Los Angeles Municipal Code to increase speed limit within the district of Olympic Boulevard between Century Park East and Florida Boulevard, Overland Avenue between Pico and Palms and Washington Boulevard. The question I basically have is this increase in speeds according to safety, or is it according to more outdated setups? The question I basically have is,
okay. Thank you.
Increase in speeds according to safety.
That concludes public comment, Mr. Brown.
It looks like we have 1 more caller. 1 second.
The question I basically have is,
okay. Thank you. Okay.
That concludes public comment, Mr. Brown.
It looks like we have 1 more caller. The most recent caller. Second. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
You fucking nigger bonnet.
Cut him off now.
Okay, we're done.
Okay, that concludes public comment. So, colleagues, I had recommended for consent approval items 1, 3, 4, and 5. Any objections to that? Okay, that concludes public comment. So, colleagues, I had recommended. Okay, I'm not seeing any objection to that. So, do you need a vote on that, Mr. White, or is that?
Yes, sir. We'll take a vote on the approval of items 1, 3, 4, and 5. Councilmember Bonnet.
I'm not seeing. You're on mute, Mr. White.
But yes, to answer your question, you'll need a vote to approve items 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
Councilmember Bonnet.
Aye.
Mr. Koretz. Councilmember Bonnet.
I'm not seeing. You're on mute.
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Those items approved.
Okay.
Councilmember Bonnet.
Aye.
Mr. Koretz.
Great. Okay, so let us go to item number 1.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Item number
Those
2.
items approved.
I'm sorry. Yes, item number 2.
Item number 2 is a Koretz Bloomfield motion requesting the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance amending section 80.81 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code to increase the speed limits to coincide with speed surveys conducted by LADOT to allow for the use of electronic enforcement of speed limits as follows. from 35 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour on Olympus Boulevard between Century Park East and Sepulveda Boulevard, from 35 miles an hour to 45 miles per hour on Overland Avenue between Pico and Palms Boulevards, and from 30 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour on Overland Avenue between Palms and Washington Boulevard, from 35 miles an hour to 45 miles per hour on Overland Avenue between Pico and Palms
Okay, Mr.
Boulevards.
Kretz, is there anything you'd like to say? Would you like to hear staff, or what do you want to do?
No, I just wanted to respond to the public comment asking why we did this. And so I wanted to point out that the state takes discretion away from cities to set our own speed limits, which has forced DOT in recent years to raise speed limits on a couple hundred miles of city streets to allow us to do proper radar enforcement. And I initially resisted at Olympic and Overland, but because of our epidemic of speeding, as much as I am not happy to suggest that we raise the speed limit to 40 miles an hour, we need to do that to allow LAPD to do speed enforcement. We have an opportunity with a bill at the state level, AB 43, by Assemblymember Friedman, which would take back that discretion. And I introduced a motion of support this week, but given the situation that we're in now, statewide, I'm doing this to improve safety and enforcement.
Thanks, Mr. Kretz. I agree with you that this is the right direction, and I agree with you on your extreme reluctance. The state has put us in a horrible and uncomfortable bind. I concur that we need Assemblywoman Friedman's bill to pass. We needed her last bill to pass. We need all the previous attempts that have been made in Sacramento for, it seems like, a generation to pass, because we really do need to have the flexibility to lower speed limits, and hers is a good first step. You know, frankly, I hope they also pass AB 550, the Chew bill, that will allow us to use speed safety cameras so we can enforce speed limits as a civil infraction without the use of armed law enforcement to do so. Together, that might help us reduce speeding on city streets and save lives. But until that day comes, this is our typical devil's bargain on speed enforcement. Any further comments from either? Until that day comes, okay, so Mr. Kretz, I assume you're moving to approve?
Yes, I would certainly ask for a vote to approve.
I'll second. Mr. White, roll call.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Bonin.
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz.
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Yes.
Item 2 approves.
Okay, that brings us to item number 6.
Item number 6 is a CAO and DOT report relative to amending the LADOT contract with MV Transportation to extend the term through April 30th, 2022 for the continued operation of the Commuter Express and Community Dash services for the North and South regions. Amending the LADOT contract with MV Transportation to extend the term through April 30th, 2022.
I believe that Mr. Kretz wanted to call this one special. Did you want staff to report, or you just wanted to say something?
No, I don't know if staff has the answer to this question. My only question was, my only problem with this contract is I know there were considerable questions about the labor practices of the contractor regarding the DASH program and parts of that. So have those problems been resolved, or is that still an item of the contractor regarding the DASH program and parts of that? So have those problems
Anybody
been
from
resolved?
staff? I believe either Mr. Harana from CAO or Brian Lee or Chun Lung from DOT.
This is Roy from the CAO's office. I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not aware of the status of any labor issues that are currently happening. I don't know if DOT staff has an update on that. This is Roy from the CAO's office. I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not aware of it.
Looks like not. How about we move it forward to council and ask staff to get Mr. Kretz an answer before then?
Is Jay Kim on? Jay, are you there?
Looks like not. How about we move it forward to council and Jay is here. He's on mute.
Is Jay Kim on? Jay, are you there?
We don't have Jay. Jay is here. He's on mute.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
What say you, Mr. Chris?
I'd either suggest that we hold it in committee till the next meeting, or
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
I could just vote no on it for now and let it pass out of committee and get the answer in time for the council meeting.
Yeah, I'd recommend we approve it, and then we can get the answer before council. Just I don't want to be holding anything up to the Dash or Commuter Express. I know some of these are going to be coming back into service soon. We don't want to hold those up. So why don't we just do a vote? Mr. White?
Yes, sir. Item number 6. Recommendation is to approve. Councilmember Bonin.
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz.
No.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
The matter is approved by a vote of 2 to 1. Recommendation is to approve.
Thank you much, and if staff could get some more info from Mr. Koretz before that comes to council, would be much appreciated. That brings us to item number 7.
Item number 7 is a Bond and Blumenfield motion instructing LADOT to report relative to the department's preferential parking district division resuming normal operations, including use of virtual petition option and the status of efforts to modernize program procedures.
Thank you. Mr. Buscaino, you asked this one to be called special. Did you want staff to report before you asked any questions? Or
sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Great. Ken Husting?
Hi. Good afternoon. Ken Husting with LADOT Parking Management. So real briefly, we are trying to get to a more digital age with the preferential parking district system, the permits division. We've already undertaken an effort to try to go with virtual petitioning. The big challenge that we're having thus far is getting accurate address data. So we've reached out to DWP. They've been working with us to try to give us their information. We did a test of a location that we knew all the addresses, and it turns out that the accuracy was only about 80%, which kind of shocked us all. And what we realized is that there's some instances where there's old buildings that are relying on 1 meter for the entire apartment building. So those are more rare cases, but those are reminiscent of the old structure buildings, to where DWP doesn't have the individual unit addresses, which are needed for when it comes to a preferential parking district. So we're trying to work out to identify those locations where we have those challenges. And then we're also looking on the private side of where we can purchase address information. So we're working through that for the virtual petitioning. And then also we're trying to create a PPD tracking system that will be available for the public. So at this point, we have something that we're working on internally to be able to track the progress of a PPD, preferential parking district. And what our goal is to take it to the next step, which would be open for council offices to be able to track where the PPDs are, with the eventuality of having it open to the public, so that the public can go ahead and request and see the progress of the PPD as it travels through the life cycle. So because that requires a lot of programming, a lot of IT support, we're looking to bring on consultants in the coming year. So our goal is hopefully to have a more digital system in place sometime next calendar year. But we are working towards that effort. We're looking to bring on consultants in the coming year. I'll be happy to take any questions you have.
Mr. Buscaino?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hessling, for the report. So just thinking beyond the petition processes, is there an effort that the department is, well, I think you just answered this, but on trying to digitize the whole PPD process, which you answered. Appreciate that. The department, do we know if the department is proactively working on tech upgrades, on finding other ways to modernize similar processes that still require in-person visits or physical paperwork? If so, how can we support these efforts?
So I can't speak for the rest of the department, but I know that with regard to petitions in the permits division, PPDs, that's the beginning point for us. What we're also looking to do, if we can get that to work, we require petitions when it comes to changing parking restrictions whether it's in the district operations or if it's in the parking meters division, where somebody has to go business to business, seeing if they want to create, for instance, a commercial loading zone. So if we're able to go ahead and make it work for the permits division, we'll carry that progress over to other groups where there is that kind of door-to-door physical activity. Now, I'm sure there's more efforts going on across the department to bring us up to the digital age, but I wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of the entire department on where those efforts are.
Okay, well, I'll just work through the chair's office and see if we can get that answer moving forward.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Ken, on this. Like so many things, a step in the right direction. We got a long way to go, but man, we need to be digitizing, and I mean, it's a crazy messed up process from another century, literally from another century, that we're using, and it's time to move forward. So this is just the first step, but looking forward to taking it. So I recommend approval. I don't think there's an objection. Mr. White, want to do a roll call? So this is just the first step, but looking forward.
Recommendations to approve item number 7. Councilmember Bonin.
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz.
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
The matter is approved. Recommendations to approve item number 7. Councilmember Bonin.
Okay.
Councilmember Koretz.
Item number 8.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Item number 8 is a CLA report relative to establishing a permanent alfresco program in the city of Los Angeles. So that's me. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As directed by the council, my office prepared a report on how to make the existing alfresco program permanent. But before I get into the report, I'd like to take a step back and recognize the hard work of staff across many departments and the mayor's office who worked so quickly to get the program up and running almost a year ago, and also acknowledge how incredibly successful and popular the program has been for both businesses and the patrons. And during this incredibly difficult year with the pandemic, the program really has been a bright spot on the landscape. So if you will let me, I'd like to turn it over to DOT so they can give you some specifics, program details on where the program stands today, and then I can get into the report.
Sounds good. Go for it.
Let me, I'd like to turn it over to DOT so they can.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jacqueline Garcia with LADOT, and I'm currently managing the LA Alfresco program. The program continues to serve as a lifeline for many types of restaurants citywide. Our department, along with our partner departments, have worked hard to continue to adjust to the needs of restaurants with respect to changing public health requirements. A recent example of this is the modification of the LA Alfresco application to allow bars to apply for outdoor dining spaces in response to new guidance from the county. To date, nearly 2,500 restaurants have received approval for one or more alfresco dining options. The majority of these are for sidewalk or private property dining. LADOT has installed 115 curbside dining areas and 16 lane closures at no cost to restaurants. Both of these on-street dining options are together supporting over 100 restaurants citywide. Thanks to the CARES funding we were allocated in October, today we have enough traffic control devices to meet current demand of feasible applications for on-street dining. We are still reviewing applications and installing new curbside dining areas on a weekly basis. Currently, we average around 5 new applications a week, and our review time is approximately 2 to 3 days. Applications received today would be installed with equipment we have already purchased through CARES funding. This report from the CLA's office is well received by the department, and we look forward to continuing to coordinate for a citywide permanent program.
Okay, with that, let me quickly run through the report and note we also have staff from BOE and Building and Safety if you have questions or want further information. So while the alfresco program is operated as one program, to transition it to a permanent status, you really need to look at it as 2 distinct programs because of the different regulatory aspects and impacts to the surrounding area. One, for those that are located on the public right-of-way, which are sidewalks and the streets, and then those on private property, most commonly the tables that you see in parking lots. So in an effort to get the restaurants up and running as quickly as possible at the beginning of the stay-at-home order, restaurants that requested to participate were pretty much given a green light within parameters of some very broad categories such as location and operation. So for the public right-of-way locations, there is a framework through the city's existing People Street program and sidewalk dining program. But it would be necessary to put in some reviews in place and ensure the city is protected and all businesses are treated equitably and that roadway safety is analyzed. And page 5 of the report outlines some of the issues that would need to be addressed. For the private property locations, there really is no regulatory framework right now, and we would need to address zoning, land use, state and federal health and safety regulations. And again, page 5 outlines some of those issues. So that's a real quick overview. And with that, I can open it up to questions or if you'd like some more information.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that there will be questions from a couple of us. Well, it looks like from all of us. I want to thank you for the work on this. You know, there's been so much horrible stuff that has happened over the past year, but there've been a few rays of sunshine that have come out of this pandemic. The way people have supported each other and the way people have come together. But then there's a few things the city has done, and this program is one of them. Want to really thank and give Mr. Buscaino a shout out for his work on this. Both, I think, were rushing to do some version of this in the early days, and I think we both put in motions on the same day. But as is his want, I think even before the motion was in, he already had al fresco operating in half of San Pedro, and has been showing the way for the rest of the city. And this has really been a very good thing. The one thing I want to ask for, because I want to make sure we're doing this with some speed and alacrity, is that for all of the report backs in here, is that we have a 60-day report back so that these aren't just languishing. But really can't underscore more the importance of this. I mean, the restaurant industry is really hanging by a thread, and this is, I think, the only thing that has kept some people afloat. Really, the only thing that has kept them afloat. And the thing we have seen is that people love this, not just the restaurants. People love it, and I think they love it regardless of what the health conditions are with the pandemic or what the required seating distance is inside. They really like outdoor dining, which frankly makes sense for a city, Los Angeles. And, you know, as Maria outlined, it's more complicated, but one of the things I want to make sure we're doing, because it gets a little more complicated for me in the coastal zone, is make sure, in addition to everything in here, is we're also continuing to work with the California Coastal Commission to make sure that the restaurants on the coast are not prevented from availing themselves of our new al fresco rules. So with that, and just with the proviso, I want to see a 60-day report back on everything. Let me turn it over to Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, want to echo your remarks and your praise, not only for the district, but working alongside you and your office in support of our restaurants, who we knew when the pandemic hit the city, they would take the hardest. They'd be the hardest hit industries among us. And thankfully, it was a blessing in disguise that we had this outdoor dining platform pilot program that we worked with the Bureau of Engineering and Public Works Department to set the framework and help streamline the processes to apply for the outdoor dining. Pandemic hit, and we were able to quickly pivot to our program, which has been very successful, to the point where a restaurateur opened a second restaurant during the pandemic, which was unheard of here. And since we've seen, thankfully, reduction of numbers and hospitalizations, folks are starting to come back with the reopening of our outdoor dining and some capacity indoor dining. If you were to stroll along 6th and 7th Street in downtown San Pedro, you'd see these dining platforms just bustling with business, and I'm happy to help lead that effort alongside you, Mr. Bonin. We're just, every time I head down there, the patrons and the restaurateurs ask me, these are staying permanently, right? They are staying here. They're not leaving us. And my response is, as long as I'm here, they're not going anywhere. I do want to recognize both the San Pedro Chamber of Commerce and the San Pedro Property Improvement District, who helped fund the build out. We were, as a city, want to thank the team for moving on the permitting process. But what I also heard from the Alfresco program, I do want to recognize the mayor and the staff here, that it was very simple for them to go online when the mayor announced the Alfresco program. And thanks and kudos to the entire department for pivoting and moving quickly on the online process. We're hopeful that this remains and continues. Just want to emphasize the need for simplicity. Don't want to get involved of innovation, get in the middle of supporting innovative approaches to supporting our small businesses and our restaurants in our city. So I'm looking forward to continuing to support our restaurants and the communities that want and need these options, outdoor dining options. And Mike, I know you've been to Italy as much as and I have as well. If we were to stroll along, cities and towns in Italy, you see these piazzas and these outdoor dining areas that and platforms that I saw in my dad's hometown in Sicily, in Bagheria, and in Trappeto, where my mom was born, and our friends who live in San Vito Lo Capo. It's like when I saw this in 2016, I said, we have to bring this to the city of LA, and happy to see that come to life. Now, with the mayor's recent, yesterday's announcement to make Alfresco permanent, he has set aside in his budget $2 million in grants to do so. How were these recommendations, my question to staff, how were these recommendations aligned with making the Alfresco program permanent?
Well, I mean, we've only looked at the budget for a couple hours here, but I did see the $2 million in there. That was it's a one-time appropriation in the contractual services account just for the Department of Transportation for grant opportunities for restaurants in low-income neighborhoods to set up the permanent parklets for the outdoor dining. Excuse me, I think we still need to address the staffing associated with doing that. So I'm sure we'll talk about this more in budget and finance when we talk about the proposed budget, and the department can respond then or now if they're prepared to. But I think staffing is going to be an issue, and how the program moves forward. Since this was grant money set aside for contractual services, we still have to talk about how to make the process administration of a permanent program work. So we'll have to talk about that further.
Thank you, Mayor, for that. Maybe staff can, I know NBC4 reporter Joel Grover did a piece on the Alfresco and outdoor dining platform program in San Pedro. One of the questions that came up was the loss of revenue from parking meters. Do we know that just yet? I just don't want to have the loss of revenue get in the way of supporting our restaurant citywide. It's not going to make or break the bank.
Well, I mean, the department can respond with more specifics, but I believe that's part of the parklet and program is to determine how much that is and either have it covered by the bid or the businesses, or to have a policy decision that we're going to, forget about that money and just move forward. So I don't know if Ken or others want to respond.
I think that's what we're trying to assess right now. We're working closely with the People Streets program and those in charge of Alfresco to determine what the impact is. I think it's a little bit difficult right now just because we know that there's some other locations where they may not have the permit or they took more than what was requested. And so we need to be able to assess those.
One thing I'd like to add, if you were to look and the gross receipts tax, the gross receipts of our restaurants on 6th and 7th Street and see exactly that can be helpful with as we make that decision. And also hopeful that the mayor's office can share with the department what permanent truly means, and that's something that I'd like to get that answer from moving forward.
Anything else, Mr. Briscaino?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just to note, that they have the outdoor stuff even in the smaller places in Italy, like Popoli.
Yes, they do.
Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and want to thank both of my colleagues on this committee for their leadership on this issue. I've been a huge fan of outdoor dining since my previous life as a West Hollywood City Council member, so I've been an active supporter for 30 odd years. A little easier in a small city like West Hollywood to do it, but I think we can do it here too. And during the pandemic, it's been a brilliant solution. Certainly, if you look, especially in Westwood, which has been devastated by the pandemic and was struggling before and probably has around 30% vacancy rate, the success is all the outdoor dining we see due to this program. My only concern, and one thing I hope we'll take a look at as we make this permanent, assuming we do, is what we do in areas where parking is incredibly tight and the parking demand is high. So this is perfect for Westwood right now with a lot of vacancies with the pandemic. But if Westwood fully comes back, the parking shortage will certainly cause some difficulty. The same thing would be true. I don't know if you can still hear me because I'm having some computer problems. If you can, the same thing would still be true on Melrose and Beverly Boulevard and 3rd Street and other areas that are incredibly competitive for parking. So I don't know if we've taken a good look at what would happen as we squeeze customers for parking by reducing it further and not encourage parking violations and folks parked in the red in every other possible spot they can find.
Yeah, and Councilman, that is part of the People Street program, to take that into consideration, working with the surrounding businesses, whether they're also restaurants or others as well. So yeah, I think that's an important point, and we'll definitely look at that.
Yeah, it's definitely worked really well, I believe, in my district, but when we have a full economic comeback, it could be a double-edged sword. So just wanted to flag that for you, and otherwise I am a very enthusiastic supporter of this.
Okay, well, that's cool. It's great when we have a 3-1 vote in this committee. So is this just an item to receive, or is this a vote to approve, Mr. White?
We have several recommendations in there, which is the request to report back.
Oh, yes, that's right.
So you want to make all of those a 60-day report back?
Yes, I would like to do that. And then, so the recommendation would be to approve as amended. When we do a roll, Mr. White?
Yes, sir. The recommendation is to approve the recommendations of the CLA report as amended to request a report back in 60 days. Mr. Bonham.
Aye.
Mr. Buscaino.
Aye.
Mr. Koretz.
Happy to be one of 3 very enthusiastic ayes.
Item 8 passes as approved, as amended.
Thank you very much. All right, the next, we're going to go to item number 10 because I want to hold item 9 in the hopes that Ms. Reynolds will be able to get here by the time we get to it. So why don't we hop to item number 10 to start?
Okay, item number 10 is an LADOT report relative to implementing a strategy for submitting transportation grant applications through improved advanced planning, prioritization, and citywide coordination for transportation projects.
Okay, before we have staff report, and I believe we've got a few folks here on this, just a little bit of some notes as a bit of a frame on why we're doing this. We've been seeing really a major growth in grant funding sources for street projects, such as ATP and potentially funding trickling down from, let's keep our fingers crossed, a federal infrastructure bill that I think we're all salivating over. And with that increase in funding, the city really has an opportunity to think bigger and bolder with grant projects. We just won the biggest ATP award in the program's history in Canoga Park and CD3. Kudos to Mr. Blumenfield for that. And with so much funding at stake, it's really important for the city to put our best foot forward during the application process, and just as importantly, to actually deliver the projects we're awarded. I mean, it's one thing to get the money, but we actually need to put it to good use. So the processes outlined in this report will help us do that. And I really think they help improve coordination on the front end of applying for grants and identifying the resources on the back end that we need to deliver. So I want to thank DOT for taking the lead on this, and thank Streets LA and BOE for coming to this virtual table here to hash out the new procedures. While there may be some adjustment early on, in the long run, I think it'll make all of our work easier. So folks, who's going to start in sort of framing this?
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Rabina Lazarian with LADOT Transportation Planning and Policy. I can provide an overview, and then myself and my colleagues, I'm joined today by Tomas Carranza and Carlos Rios of LADOT, Cecilia Castillo of Streets LA, and Steve Chen of BOE. So we could all make ourselves available for questions. But just as a quick summary, this report identifies near-term opportunities to improve coordination and more strategically pursue grant funding for transportation projects. The strategies presented in the report were jointly developed by staff from our respective departments and would improve planning, prioritization, and citywide coordination for grant funding activities for transportation projects. The strategies highlighted in the report include establishing a working group to set ground rules and track upcoming grant cycles, as well as developing procedures around project selection, prioritization, and grant application development. These new procedures would formalize the process for adding project ideas to the project development pipeline. For example, this could include project ideas that emerge from community engagement activities, ideas that are identified by council staff as needs in their respective districts, or that are identified through planning processes such as safe routes to school. The report strategies also include offering training and office hours for project planning and implementation leads at each department on these procedures and tools, and improving project tracking and coordination for both unfunded projects and projects that receive grant funding. Attachment A is included as a living document that staff would revise to keep consistent with departmental procedures and responsive to available grant opportunities. This report also identifies resources needed to fully build out the mobility investment program in order to more holistically plan transportation improvements citywide, more strategically pursue funding opportunities, and deliver 5-year and 20-year mobility investment plans. Thank you, and we can now take any questions you may have.
Okay, Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm certainly all in for any effort to improve our ability to get our fair share of funding. And I've always thought the city in general didn't do enough to pursue grants. My only concern is that with all the events of the past year, that led to the retirement of many of our most experienced staff, along with the hiring freeze. How do we make sure that we have the staff necessary both to pursue the grants, make the deadlines to apply, but also that we reach the deadlines in spending the funding that has been received and will be received in the future?
I can start by, I think that's an excellent question, Councilmember Koretz, and one that I think will require a lot of advanced planning in terms of matching our projects that we have in our planning pipelines with our resources, and through our budgeting processes, ensuring that we have the resources at each of our departments available in order to be able to not only pursue the funding opportunities, but also implement those projects. I think the first steps of that process are identifying what projects we might have in our pipelines. So these are projects that perhaps we today currently in the way that we handle that process. Often once the funding opportunity is available, we look for those opportunities. But through this more of an advanced planning framework, we would be able to better plan and resource for those opportunities so that we're in more of a proactive role and able to better anticipate those situations.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Buscaino, any questions? Okay, and this one is a receive and file, yes? Yes, it is. All right, so let's receive that item, and then we will move to item number 9.
Before you do, Councilman, as a receive and file action, we'll need to take a vote count on that. So,
Okay.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz.
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye again.
The item is received and filed. Thank you.
You may, I think, Mr. Clerk, you missed a chair.
Mr. Blunt.
You said Buscaino twice, but
Did I?
you know,
There'll be a 3-0 vote.
we vote so similarly on everything that it's easy to.
You're both on the same side of the Zoom screen too.
Well, he's
in
just
this committee, we actually do, so it's understandable here. All right, so let's head to item number 9.
Item number 9 is the LADOT report relative to the Vision Zero implementation strategy for 2021.
Okay, is Ms. Reynolds here yet?
It doesn't appear so. This is Dan Mitchell, Assistant General Manager for LADOT.
All right, if you can throw in a bit of a sort of a southern twang while you speak, a few y'alls, you'll be.
All right, listen up, y'all. We got something to say about Vision Zero. Okay, thank you, council members. The report before you today lays out significant accomplishments in our comprehensive efforts to eliminate the number of people killed on our city streets. In 2020, together with city partners, we have made major progress with the investments that the mayor and the city council have made over the past several years. Working with the community, we have transformed major streets, installed new left turn arrows and new traffic signals, and upgraded hundreds of crosswalks across the city. This plan for 2021 continues our thoughtful and data-driven approach to concentrate resources on the streets experiencing the greatest number of people killed and severely injured, with a focus on reducing speeding and the impacts of that behavior. But despite all of those efforts, an epidemic of disrespectful and selfish behavior continues on our streets. People are driving their cars in a way that fails to acknowledge the basic dignity of people who have a right to walk and ride and share space on our streets. Just this past February, we saw Brandon Finley, a father and the son of a member of our city family, was senselessly killed on 7th Street in downtown. On a quiet morning, as Mr. Finley prepared to make a left turn toward his destination while riding his bike, he saw no oncoming traffic, but a man who had just stolen a vehicle drove it at a high rate of speed on the wrong side of the street and plowed him down before he even knew what was coming. We are also seeing a growing callousness of drivers toward the value of human life. A few weeks ago on Normandy in South Los Angeles, a person experiencing homelessness was run over, not by just one driver, not 2 drivers or 3, but 4 drivers without anyone stopping to render help. We must continue to urgently invest, as we have, in redesigning our streets, because we are making a difference. But we also need new tools and new engagement strategies to increase awareness and restore respect for all people, no matter how they get around Los Angeles. Yesterday, as the council members alluded to, the State Assembly Transportation Committee unanimously approved a thoughtful and comprehensive bill, AB 43, to address how we set speed limits on the streets of our cities. not a single person spoke in opposition to that bill. Los Angeles and other cities in the state have been working with Assemblymember Laura Friedman to pass a comprehensive bill that would specifically allow cities to retain speed limits without having to increase them to enforce them. It would allow us to retain those speed limits when changes to the streets haven't been made with a specific intention of increasing the safe operating speed. As this committee well knows, the committee has reluctantly approved our recommendation to increase speed limits on over 193 miles of streets in order to enforce them. This bill would allow Los Angeles to roll back those speed limits and return to more sensible speeds on our streets. 2 weeks from now, that same committee will hear AB 550 to authorize a pilot for speed safety cameras, an important strategy to help reduce speed on our streets without tying up our limited enforcement resources. And finally, I'd like to highlight a change in traffic collision reporting that we included at the end of our report that highlights how, due to reduced resources, the LAPD no longer takes crash reports for crashes that are property damage only or complaint of pain in most circumstances. Only severe injury and fatal crashes are now getting police reports, which we suspect has resulted in severe underreporting of crashes. Thus far, LAPD has recorded 60% fewer crashes compared to the same time period in 2021. But actually, if we look at the number of people who have died on our streets, we've seen 94 people die so far this year, which represents a nearly 50% increase just since the beginning of the year. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mariana Valdivia and Carlos Rios to share more about the Vision Zero program.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Dan, for framing this discussion. Good afternoon, council members. Carlos Rios here, Vision Zero and Active Transportation Bureau Head. I am here with Mariana Valdivia, Planning Supervisor, to provide our annual Vision Zero update. We are also joined by Lauren Ballard of our team. As directed by council, we are here to summarize and provide a little more detail on our 2020 accomplishments and provide an overview of our 2021 plan. I will tee it up now for Mariana to highlight the major transformative accomplishments we have made in 2020, despite the pandemic year, and I will pick it up after to highlight our work plan for 2021. Mariana?
Afternoon, council members. The Vision Zero team's guiding principle is that roadway crashes resulting in fatalities and serious injuries are preventable. Our team has focused on implementing safety improvements on high priority corridors. Since our action plan was adopted, we've upgraded crosswalks to continental crosswalks and speed feedback signs on all of our priority corridors. We've installed flashing beacons and other crosswalk upgrades that provide a sense of comfort and allow more time for crossing, with our goal of safety for our pedestrians. 2/3 of our identified corridors have updated traffic signal timing, and 75% of our Vision Zero signals have been upgraded with timing upgrades. These improvements overall are making an impact on people's lives. In the last year, with the Streets LA Adapt program, has aided our ability to implement 2 major lane configurations on Avalon Boulevard and Broadway in South LA, totaling almost 8.5 miles. These reconfiguration projects holistically change our streets for our most vulnerable users. Streets are less prone to unsafe lane changes and speeding. People walking have fewer lanes to cross, and people biking get a dedicated lane. LADOT has continued to diversify its toolkit even during the pandemic. We're thinking differently and trying new things. We installed 5 modular bus boarding platforms on Avalon earlier this year. We've piloted a left turn calming device and a modular pedestrian refuge island. In 2020, we also installed the city's first speed tables on 3 priority corridors, and we continue to evaluate these projects. We continue to build relationships and work with our partner departments, including the Department of Public Works. Last year, we got in the ground and started construction on Reseda Boulevard with our Complete Streets program, and we're designing Avalon Boulevard to get our safety improvements to concrete for long-term improvements. We're also working with Caltrans, and we meet with them regularly, and we've installed basic safety upgrades on Lincoln and Santa Monica Boulevards. Safer at Home and Quarantine has challenged our staff to think creatively, to continue to speak with our neighborhoods and engage with our communities. We've done Google surveys, telephone conference hours, and more importantly, we picked up the phone. One of the highlights during pandemic was actually, listening to the little old ladies of our neighborhood, our experts, who really told us, what's going on. And for them, that was a highlight, unfortunately, during their time of isolation. So this just reminds us that a combination of old school and new school is really a great way to stay in tune with the neighborhoods that we're serving. So Carlos will now highlight our work plan.
Thank you, Mariana. Again, given the challenges we've collectively faced this year, we are proud to have continued to make these life-saving improvements, as Mariana pointed out. The raw numbers of what we have accomplished in 2020 cannot be understated. Pandemic aside, 2020 is a year where most of our Vision Zero financial investments have come to roost. We are confident that these investments the city has made to date and continues to make will continue to pay dividends. In 2021, we plan on building off of our 2020 successes. We will continue to make capital improvements along 17 priority corridors this year. Also, as part of our Vision Zero signal package that was awarded last year, we plan on activating new traffic controls at 49 locations by the end of this calendar year. Through our data-driven approach, we have also expanded our priority corridors by 8 this year, and we have also identified 30 additional priority intersections. We will begin prioritizing phase 1 improvements along our new priority corridors, which will include our bread and butter quick build treatments such as crosswalk upgrades, intersection tightenings where feasible, speed feedback signs, identifying locations to install beacons at uncontrolled locations, and looking at installing leading pedestrian intervals and signal timing upgrades. Also, we just released the construction bid package out to bid that will include 30 additional intersection improvements, including signals, left turn phasing, pedestrian hybrid beacons. We hope to be able to award this contract later this fall and begin construction immediately thereafter. As Mariana had pointed out, we continue to work with our partners at Public Works in the design and implementation of our Complete Streets program. Our Safe Routes to School program has also had a stellar year. We're nearly completed capital improvements at 10 schools, and we continue design efforts on 12 more. Our team continues to collaborate with our partner agencies to aggressively seek outside funding opportunities. All these major accomplishments were realized due to the dedication of our Vision Zero team, our tireless field crews, and as Mariana pointed out, collaboration with our partner agencies such as Bureau of Engineering, Streets LA, and Bureau of Street Lighting, to name a few. We continue to commit to deliver on the Vision Zero model of a data-driven approach and make systematic improvements along corridors and intersections in most need. We are here to answer any questions or address any concerns that the committee may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you for the report. Thanks really to the whole department for and the various different departments that cooperate for the work on Vision Zero. I mean, this is vital. This is essential. I think you're doing phenomenal work, and you're doing an incredible amount of it. The problem is we seem to be swimming against a really a big and heavy tide of bigger and faster vehicles and more distracted and reckless drivers, and the pandemic has certainly exacerbated a lot of that. And so as we're making the highest priority streets safer through your targeted work, these broader trends are really just, they're adding more streets and intersections to our list. To me, that means you're doing the right things with the resources and the tools that you're given, but you're just not given enough resources and enough tools. I haven't looked over the new proposed budget yet. I hope and trust that there's more investments there, but we need more, and hopefully some of the infrastructure legislation will give us some more tools as well. and hopefully some of the state bills will help us out with some other safety measures. Just a couple areas I wanted to ask about. You know, you used to hear a lot about street racing in the valley, and you would hear about it a little bit in my part of town. During the pandemic, that has changed a lot, and we have heard a lot about street racing and reckless driving. Um, I mean, we had a regular thing on Sunday nights near LMU, and then it would move, and it would be in Venice, and then it would be in Mar Vista, and it would start on the big streets, and then it would, when the cops came, it would go into the smaller streets, and it was a really big problem. And as I said, exacerbated by the pandemic, because wide and relatively empty streets are just an open invite for both organized and impromptu street racing. How does LADOT respond to the complaints, and how does LAPD work with you to troubleshoot problematic locations?
Again, this is Dan Mitchell with LADOT. Um, I'll I'll start for a moment. I thank you, Councilmember Bonin. That has been a growing issue. My son is at LMU and hears them down the hill, down the bluff. So I know how big of a problem that is. We have been partnering with LAPD and with council offices to try to identify those, and we've experimented and piloted different treatments, from rumble strips and different bollards to try to make certain intersections less attractive. But it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole. Wherever we make one improvement, it moves. The problem moves elsewhere. So I would like to introduce my partner, Commander Woodyard with LAPD, to speak about their approach to helping to resolve this problem.
Please.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces. Can you guys hear me? All right. How you doing, Dan? So I think it all begins with the relationship that we've honed and developed with the Department of Transportation. Dan and his team, every Tuesday we have a meeting to talk about various issues as it relates to traffic, But in particular, when we're talking about street racing has been a phenomenon in the city of Los Angeles for many years. It goes back to, and I don't want to say how far it goes back. It goes back to almost 1950. But with that being said, I just recently got over to Traffic Group, probably about 8 months ago. And what I noticed was that each division, a traffic division that has, that represents the 4 different bureaus, did not have a street racing task force. And so we just recently created a street racing task force in West Bureau. And so if you look at all the other bureaus, not only do they communicate with each other, but they work with each other in terms of, as Dan eloquently stated, it's almost like a whack-a-mole deal, but with cooperation with the various street racing task force throughout the city, as well as with our allied agencies. I think we have a good game plan in terms of how to address it. But I will say that we don't have enough resources in traffic division to adequately address all the different um, different incidents that occur through the city. So what we also have done, as opposed to just relying on traffic division to take the lead on it, we've also worked with our patrol partners from the Office of Operations. So, for example, in West Bureau, we've dedicated at least 20 to 30 officers and what we call Fun Day Sunday. And so it's fun for the people that are out there, you know, involving themselves. And when we say street racing, it's not street racing; it's street takeovers. And so we again they've dedicated a lot of resources to it. A part of the issue and a part of the problem is training. So we've also done some internal training for our partners um, and our police officers on the department. There's an internal video that talks about tactics as you deal with the street takeovers when they have the laser lights, things of that nature. So we are aware of it and we're taking proactive steps, and we look forward to continuing to adjust our tactics as their tactics change as well.
Thanks, Commander, and thanks for the support in West Bureau. Much appreciated. Um, question about some of the trends during the pandemic. Um, did we discern different crash patterns during the pandemic? Did we learn anything from them? I know that I think anyway that fatal crashes stayed basically flat, but traffic volumes dropped precipitously. So what's sort of driving that?
So, I mean, if you look at across the city last year, we actually were below as it relates to fatals by a few numbers. But with that being said, if you look at where we're trending at now, we're sitting at about 48% increase. We're sitting at 89 fatalities, and that number can change. I mean, I have my numbers are 89 um, versus 60 last year. So we're sitting at about 48%. But if you look at South Bureau in particular, they've had a challenge. It's been a challenge for us. And so they've had 33 compared to 17 last year. And the trend has been, as many of you have stated, it's been speed. Um, Last year for the city, it's been speed, and it's been pedestrians in the roadway. Um, Joe, and I hate to say this, speed is an issue citywide, but in South Bureau,
Yep.
they've had a number of just weird traffic collisions. For example, running into running off the freeway and ending up in the riverbed because the guy's drunk. Same another day before that, another guy ran into a big freeway stanchion. So it's a lot of traffic collisions where folks are running off the road and running into fixed objects as well. And so, how do we address that as an organization, as a community? It's really just education to the community. A part of that is going to be education, making sure that we're providing data that indicates, hey, you speed, the likelihood of you actually having severe injuries and or passing away in that traffic collision is high. Whereas if you follow the speed limit, then the ability of you surviving that increases. And so education is not one part. The other part is we do enforcement, and sometimes we do warnings, but we also have task force to address pedestrians in the roadway. Are vehicles stopping for those pedestrians in the roadway? So we'll do those type of task forces. We do DUI task forces. We do sobriety checks. We do all of those different things, but at the same time, there's got to be some ownership by us, by the community, because everybody deserves to be on these streets, safely. Whether you're a pedestrian, whether you're on horseback, whether you're on bicycles, whether you're on the scooters, we just want to make sure that the streets are safe for everybody. And I'd like to end by saying I'm very comfortable with the relationship we have with DOT. We're able to identify problems together and we work on them right away. Specifically for street racing over in Hollenbeck, there was a problem location, and the conversations and the cooperation with not only DOT but with the city council offices, I mean, it's been phenomenal. So I think we have a great model going forward in terms of addressing problems and addressing them rather quickly.
Thanks, Commander. Dan, the commander mentioned South Bureau. What is DOT doing on its end to address the collisions and the fatalities in South LA?
Council members, we have taken a comprehensive and data-driven approach to addressing these. As you know, we review the data every 2 years in order to develop our priority corridors, where we concentrate our resources on the streets that are most at risk, and many of those appear in South Los Angeles, and that's where we have made a significant number of investments. In fact, this past year, we, with our partners in the Bureau of Street Services, Streets LA, we installed a new street configuration on Avalon that covered 6.5 miles. It was a huge and monumental installation. We also had a significant installation, street reconfiguration on Broadway for a mile in preparation for anticipating a major project that will be built out in the coming years. So we continue, besides that, we continue to monitor the crashes that are happening on a weekly basis. And in case anyone was paying very close attention, the discrepancy between the 89 and the 94 is 89 fatal crashes, but 94 people have died so far this year. So the commander and I are on the exact same page. I just wanted to clarify that. But the one trend that we're seeing so far this year is that a significant portion, maybe close to half of those crashes, are not the ones that are typically correctable using traffic engineering and rely on additional tools. And that's why I highlighted the importance of being able to adjust speed limits and to pilot speed safety cameras.
Yep.
Thanks. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to thank staff with Vision Zero for helping to cover a handful of protected only left turns in my district, and for moving up in the queue the intersection of Olympic and Overland, where Monique Munoz passed away a little while ago.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure that her circumstance could have been prevented by that. She was apparently killed by a 17-year-old driver going around 120 miles an hour in his brand new Lamborghini. So 120 miles an hour in a 35-mile zone. I don't know how you can address that, but hopefully all the actions we are taking will save lives in the long run. And I appreciate it. I do want to note that unfortunately very few of the Vision Zero locations are in Council District 5, so we don't see many of these projects. But we have a number of traffic signal projects that have been approved in CD5 but don't have funding. So I would just ask that you please take another look at those in the next year or so, and see if we could find funding for some of those other serious locations that are outside of the high entry network, but are still areas that need assistance. So other than that, I just thank you for your good work with Vision Zero, and we just have to keep working to save lives and figure out how to address the bigger problem that we're seeing right now of incredible rates of speed. Certainly, I think the use of cameras to help enforce, I think, will be helpful. And I've thought that for a long time. I was a co-author with Sheila Kuehl of her legislation to attempt to do this 15 years ago in the state legislature. I think then it wasn't as obvious. I think now with this absolute epidemic of reckless speeding in the city of Los Angeles, certainly it should be more obvious to LA legislators, and we should continue to certainly press our delegation to move forward and support. So thank you for everything you're doing, and keep up the good work.
Sir.
Let's see. The other Joe Buscaino.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Commander Whittier, thanks so much for your report. And I just want to emphasize my concern, and on behalf of the South Los Angeles representatives on the council, the amount of fatalities in South Los Angeles are clearly alarming. Based on the report before us, we saw an increase in South Bureau by 23% in a time that Vision Zero's main purpose is to reduce fatalities. So I'm hopeful that, we put an emphasis where we saw other bureaus reduce their fatality numbers. We saw an increase in South Los Angeles. So I'd like to see an updated map of the KSI numbers and crashes in South Bureau. I know the maps weren't attached to this report. If I can, we work offline with the department. And for the newly identified Vision Zero priority corridors and intersections, can you walk us through rough timeline and next steps or potential improvements at these specific locations in South Los Angeles?
I can sort of take that one if you want
Okay.
to. Want to go ahead? So the first thing that we'll do with our new priority corridors and intersections is upgrade what we call our phase one treatments, which is like restriping continental crosswalks, doing intersection tightenings where they'll fit, adding edge lines, everything that basically can be deployed fairly quickly with striping and bollards and signs. And then we'll also work with our signal folks to update any signal timing that can be done using the existing infrastructure, and make sure that those are all sort of at their safest standards. And then we will go through, and I'll start with for the priority corridors, and we would move into a more comprehensive project development process that assesses crash patterns, existing infrastructure, land uses, traffic volumes, mobility plan designation, and assesses any other projects that may be in the pipeline in the area. And at that time, we would bring that information to the council office, the relevant council office, and have a conversation about what we're seeing. And get information from the council office about your experiences, what your constituents have told you about that area, and from there work to identify a possible range of safety improvements. So that could be anything from new signals or signal upgrades to lane reconfigurations. And at that time, we would also start to develop a community engagement plan. Carry out the community engagement plan alongside an iterative design process, and do a final round of outreach and install the project. And so it really just depends on the sort of range and nature of the project, what the timeline might be. We are aiming to get those first phase one improvements in during that next fiscal year. And then as for the other sorts of more comprehensive project developments, that would be something that would be done in communication and on a timeline with each council office.
And Joe, I called you Joe because you're a good friend of mine.
I'm perfectly fine with that, Gerald.
Sorry, sir. So we are well aware of what's going on in South Bureau. So we, for the last 3 weeks and going into this week, depending on how the city's faring, we've had our fatal traffic reduction task force in South Bureau for this very reason, which is just an increase of resources in the area for education, number one. And then the second part is to really focus in on those high entry networks or those corridors that kind of overlay into where we're having some of the issues. So we're aware of it. We're making sure that our resources are aware of it. And just to piggyback on it, what Dan mentioned earlier, we are still, traffic group is still handling, not only do we do enforcement, but we handle all the fatalities. We handle all of the hit and run felonies. We also handle all DUI related traffic collisions, as well as severe traffic collisions. And when you think of severe traffic collisions, that can include a 14-year-old driving into the back of a car because they're on a mini bike. And so when I say don't be alarmed with the numbers, because the numbers are they're there, but a lot of the issues that we're seeing in South, in particular, the majority are going to be speed, but then you have a lot of just one-offs that are unusual for the community. So there's a lot of conversations going on with your CSP as it relates to the mini bikes and some of the the different areas. So we're holistically working with the partners to make sure that we are at least having those conversations, and hopefully we can reduce the amount, or at least stem the tide down in South.
I appreciate that. I want to elevate this concern, particularly in South Los Angeles, as we remind ourselves that Vision Zero is called to eliminate fatalities by 2025, and we're actually increasing these numbers in South Los Angeles. So I want to elevate that priority in these main corridors in South Los Angeles. Kind of counters to what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yes, sir.
So let us know how we can help and relaying the information with the education, enforcement, and engineering, the 3 E's of traffic.
Yes, sir.
West Traffic Division, 2.5 years.
No more questions or comments? Okay. So that wraps it up. Thank you to the staff from the various departments for the report. We will receive and file this one, and Mr. White is going to do a roll call on that.
Yes, sir. The recommendation is to receive and file. I will begin with Mr. Bonin. Councilmember Bonin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Koretz.
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Yes.
The report is received and filed.
All right, and if I am not mistaken, that clears the desk, yes?
That is correct.
All right, so we are done. We are adjourned. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.